Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Whiskey Wednesday webcast from WhiskyCast.com. I'm Mark Gillespie in the WhiskyCast studio in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Hope you've had a good few days and a great weekend the other day and are ready to get after it for the next hour or so. We're going to have some fun talking about whiskeys here. Before I bring in our guests, I want to give you a quick update on some program notes that we're going to be doing a little bit of changing things around here. Basically, we're going to cut back to one webcast a week. We've been doing them on Wednesday nights and Friday nights, but we are going to start cutting back to once a week. And we're going to start that next week. We're going to do things on Friday nights from now on. And basically, the only reason behind it is because there's a lot of content out there that's being produced and a lot of demand for guests. And what we've found is that a lot of folks are tied up right now with doing appearances and things, and what I would rather do is focus on producing one really good webcast with a really good panel of guests once a week, rather than doing 2 a week and maybe not being able to get as the kind of panels that we'd like to get because people have schedule commitments. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start this next week, next Friday night on, I believe, October 30th. We already have Wright Thompson from ESPN scheduled to join us. Wright is the author of a new book about the Van Winkle family called Pappyland. You can read my review of it at the WhiskyCast website right now, and trust me, it is an excellent read. And if you are into bourbons at all, even if you're not into bourbons, it's just a great story, well told, and it's a story that will make you think, and it will grab you by the heart a little bit. So Wright is going to join us next week, and we'll have some other guests as well. And we're going to do the Writers' Roundtable panels that we normally have been doing on Friday nights. We're going to cut those back as well to once a month or so, and then bring some of the brand folks on the rest of the month on Friday nights. But I'd rather produce one really good webcast than a couple of average ones, and I hope you guys understand that. So that said, I just wanted to bring you up to date on where our plans are. So we will get started with this week's panel right now. And I want to bring in, first of all, well, let's bring in both guys. Thomas Mooney is joining us from his offices in Portland, Oregon at House Spirits, where they make Westward American single malt whiskey, not the folks up in Seattle that make Westland. And Gordon Dundas, our pal from Macleod Distillers in Scotland, which is now releasing its first Rosebank whiskey in quite a long time. That was announced earlier today. Gentlemen, how are you doing tonight?
Really well, Mark. How are you?
So, Gordon, what do you have in your glass, first of all?
Well, bit of a story. My basically so I have got a Tandoori, which is a fantastic replacement, but a very different style of whiskey to a Rosebank. So a Tandoori, all sherry casks, Tandoori 15, absolutely tremendous whiskey. So that's what I've got.
Sounds good, Tom. I know it's the middle of the afternoon out in Portland. What do you have in your glass right now, or your can, as it may be?
Yeah, well, I mean, you might argue you can't trust a whiskey maker who isn't enjoying his own whiskey, but it is still the middle of the day. So what I have here is a bottle of our Westward American single malt, and I will celebrate our conversation with a little dram of it a bit later, but that's what I'll be enjoying today.
And let's talk about that first of all, Tom, because you guys have just really are about to reintroduce Westland or Westward, and I'm going to screw that up 6 times tonight before we're done here. And I'm going to put $1 in the curse jar for every time I screw it up and say Westland instead of Westward. But this is the new packaging for Westward that you're releasing nationwide in a couple of weeks here, right?
That's correct. I'll just say something about the Westland Westward thing because it seems to be mixing people up. So we're very good friends with Westland. It has come to our attention that we share a syllable. And as I was mentioning to you earlier, it's also come to our attention that many a distillery in Scotland shares a syllable. So we think we're going to get through this, and what we do is distinctive enough that we don't expect there to be any confusion there. But yes, so Westward, we've been making whiskey for nearly 20 years in Oregon, and when we set out to do this, we had the intention to reimagine single malt in a way that was inspired by the culture and people and the environment of the American Northwest. And so having the intention was one thing. Creating the whiskey that expresses that was the next step, and we've been doing that for over a decade now. And so this is, I think, the culmination of that, which is, visually, what is the package, what is the visual expression of the brand that really captures the American Northwest.
And let's just show by comparison. This is your original Oregon Pinot Noir cask, and this is the new packaging for it. And this is actually going to be nationwide because this one you can only get in Oregon, right?
Yeah, I mean, only very, very special people like you, Mark, have a bottle of that. We had actually not released it broadly in the U.S., so most people who love our whiskey will have their first experience with our Westward Pinot Noir expression in the new pack, in that new crimson wine-colored label.
And Gordon, let's talk about that new Rosebank right now. As Bill Ricker pointed out, I believe here, and I'm just scrolling to find the comments here, the return of Rosebank. Gordon, let's talk about the Rosebank 30 you guys unveiled today.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I'll give you a little bit of a story from the beginning, but I mean, it was really due to Ian McLeod's unique position within the whiskey industry that we managed to obviously get the remaining stock, the distillery site, and all the IP for Rosebank in 2017. Really, we're currently rebuilding, and that's been just waylaid a little bit just because of COVID, but that will be continuing. And so we should have a distillery in 2022 with a new whiskey from that distillery, let's say 2030. I mean, I'm guessing, but not much time before that, I wouldn't think. So all the stock we have is all pre-1993. So, it's old Rosebank. And this is the first release, global release through distributors around the world. So will be available in markets, including America from next year. And it's a 30-year-old whiskey that really reflects that Rosebank style, which we hear a lot about, and I've just talked about it with Tandoori Sherry cask maturation, beautiful sherry cask from Spain. Rosebank was a very different animal. It was a whiskey that was driven very much by its spirit style because of its uniqueness of triple distillation, which says to you, would say light and sort of quite a light whiskey. And then you use worm tub condensers, which are a big heavier style, produce a more sulfury, heavier spirit in that condenser element compared to a shell and tube. So it was always a whiskey that was driven by that sort of fruity floral element that was created, but it had a bit of weight to it. This 30-year-old is a fantastic, really fantastic example of Rosebank, matured in ex-bourbon hogsheads and also in old sherry casks as well, refill sherry casks. So it's got some really, not bold cask flavors for sure, but a lot of that spirit coming through after 30 years. Wonderful whiskey.
And Bill Ricker says, you had me at worm tub.
Yeah, I mean, not many distilleries use worm tub condensers. And if you look at the distilleries in Scotland that do, you think of one that springs to mind, Craig Ellichie, is known for that more meaty style. Because of that's a big factor in that. So triple distillation and a worm tub is a complete it's a complete oxymoron. It just doesn't seem to work together. You would never generally think of doing that.
And Tabitha Spirit Bomb says that Rosebank is well out of my price range. What is that price range? I don't recall seeing it anywhere on the news releases today.
It's £1,600. So £1,600 for a 30-year-old whiskey, of which, that's it. There is no more of it. There will be more releases, but for a closed distillery for 30-year-old whiskey, I'm not saying it's I think it's good value for a whiskey that is not good value, but it's a good opportunity to get something like that you would drink at a celebratory. £50 a year. That's the way I look at it. It's about £50 a year. It's not much.
No, not at all. I mean, if you have it, let's go ahead and get it. Let's see what else we have. And of course, we're open to your comments as well. Please feel free to post your comments and questions if you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope. If you're watching on Twitter, and I say this every time, don't put your replies in the tweet with the video because we won't see that until after the show. They won't show up here on my window that we can use to pull things out. And also, please feel free to share with us what you're drinking tonight. Let's see here. We have some David Owen sipping on a Tomatin 15 American Oak.
Nice.
Not an editorial comment there, just clearing my throat. And Petehead says, I do not consider the Rosebank the first bargain that comes to mind, but it's not for everyone. If you're
No, it's like everything in life. It's like everything in life. People have, there's different things for different people. Will always be like that. There are people that will buy £1,600 bottles of whiskey, and there are people that won't buy it. But at the moment, when you've got old whiskey, that's the only thing we can provide at the moment. So that's from Rosebank. When we have an 8-year-old in 8 to 10 years' time, it will be much more at a price point that was for everybody.
And Tabitha points out that she restricts herself to less than £100 per bottle, but she did break that for her bottle of Glengoyne 28-year-old, which is another one of your distilleries.
It is, and that is a beauty of a whiskey. So that's a beauty sherry cask, Oloroso sherry cask, beautiful.
And we always have to point out that value is relative. Sometimes there's a firstborn kid you'd like to sell off, and sometimes there isn't. So it depends on what's being offered at times, what the price tag is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think pricing in whiskey is a bit of a hot topic at the moment with the secondary market now, which is a much more, people look at it much more than they did even 2 or 3 years ago when they look at. So the secondary market is a consideration for a lot of people who buy whiskey. Of course it is. And we're aware of it as a producer as well.
Great question here from Chris Ratcliffe on the construction at Rosebank. There wasn't much left when you guys came in, I know. So you're having to pretty much rebuild everything but the original buildings from scratch. But what did you inherit besides the plans that were in the blueprints for the original distillery and the stills that were in the Diageo archives?
Diageo were brilliant, to be fair. Diageo were great to help us out with their archive. They've got an amazing archive. So Diageo were very helpful. But, I mean, there was limited information. So we had still sizes. We had, the size of the worm tubs. We had that sort of stuff. But there was nothing there that was reusable. I mean, the stills were stolen famously. The copper had been stolen over years for the stills. And so, it really is the only thing is it's the same site. It is going to be produced in the same way to the same size of stills and the same production techniques, for sure, in terms of triple distillation and worm tubs. And so we've got some really talented distillers within Ian Macleod. We've got great guys at Tandoori, great guys at Edinburgh Gin as well, great guys at Glengoyne who really understand distillation, and that's going to come into play in terms of getting that spirit where you take the benefit of triple distillation, but you then use the worm tub in a way that you get a great overall spirit. So it will take a little bit of jiggery pokery, is a technical Scottish term, to get it the way we want it. But yeah, I think there's a good chance we can get the spirit better. I genuinely think that's true.
So, Tom, let's turn to you now. Your whiskeys are made at House Spirits in Portland, your distillery there. Portland has been, if there's a city that defines 2020, I think it would have to be Portland. In a lot of ways, that's going to be the city that gets remembered for a lot of things in 2020.
We do seem to make the news every now and then.
Yeah. How have you guys been affected by, let's see, the pandemic, social justice protests, the Oregon wildfires? Anything we're leaving out here?
Oh, I'm sure there is. I think the world is going through a lot, and I wouldn't say Portland is going through more than the world. I think it's a city that wants to be in the forefront on thinking and on change, and so I think a lot of what has come across in the news as protests is really an effort to lead change that most people in the city believe in, and I think most reasonable people around the world believe in. So that thought leadership is something we're proud of. When thought leadership turns into broken buildings or windows and fires, then that's not something to be proud of. But I think it's important to focus on the positive of why those protests are happening. And I mean, we as a company have taken a very public stance, in favor of Black Lives Matter and the cause that initiated many of these protests. And that's something we plan to continue.
Tom, I think we had a little bit of an echo there on the end with maybe the Bluetooth on your earbuds or whatever as it was picking up. Could you just sort of repeat that last part?
Yeah, my apologies. No, I was just saying, I think the feeling behind the protest in Portland is an important cause and one that we very much believe in and support. And we equally believe in not breaking things and not burning things. And so it's important to keep this positive and focus on the cause that initiated everything. And I think most people, are focused on that. The fires, which you mentioned, I mean, are an entirely different story. I was mentioning earlier, one of the fires a few weeks ago got to within 12 miles of the home of all of our whiskey barrels. And at that point, it was uncontained, so it could have gone either way. We were very fortunate and are very grateful to firefighters in Oregon for the work that saved our barrels and saved a lot of people's homes and businesses.
Let's explain that while your distillery is located in an industrial neighborhood just outside of downtown Portland, your maturation facility is, I guess, about 10 miles outside of town to the south, right?
Which doesn't seem like much, but Portland has very tight urban boundaries, so it doesn't take long to be out of the city. And yes, like you say, our barrels live in Clackamas, Oregon, and it was the Riverside fire in particular that came into Clackamas and came very close to us. But again, fortunately, the whiskey was saved, and so there's plenty of it to do wonderful things in the years to come.
Now, this is not the first year that there have been wildfires around Oregon. What precautions do you guys take, or can you take, in the industrial park where your warehouse is located to try to protect those barrels if, God forbid, a fire gets too close?
To have our insurance up to date. I mean, there really is no practical way to move thousands of whiskey barrels, at a moment's notice. And so when, as the fire drew near, I mean, really our precaution was about our team, not about the whiskey. And so we shut down the barrel warehouse. That delayed some of actually the release of two of our whiskeys in our new package because we couldn't get in there to make the mingles that we then bottle. But I mean, we went through that very scary fire moment for a week, and then I mean, just hellacious air quality for the days that followed, where it was literally dangerous to go outside your house. So we did have to shut down for a couple of weeks due to that.
Shut down distilling too, because I've got to wonder, would that affect the flavors at all if it gets in while you're fermenting? We shut down our activities at the barrel warehouse for more time because it was closer to the fire. It had worse air quality. We did shut down the distillery itself for a few days, but not quite as long as the barrel facility. Now, for the record, since I didn't say what I was drinking, before the webcast started, I was on a webcast with some folks from Ireland, from Northern Ireland, on a webcast that was organized by the British Embassy with the British Ambassador to the U.S. and also the folks from the Irish Whiskey Association. So I'm going through one of the samples of the Quiet Man 8-year-old single malt. And just a quick news update here. One of the things we talked about on that call, and you'll hear more about it on the show this weekend, but while Irish single malts are part of that tariff issue that has affected Scotland and single malts from Scotland, considering the way that they put it, about 99.3% of all Irish whiskeys are tariff-free and export to the U.S. because they're not single malts. There has been minimal impact on single malt exports to the U.S. from Ireland. Kieran Mulgrew of the Quiet Men said they've basically, and Niche Drinks said they've basically had more damage to their cream liqueur business from the tariffs, which affect all cream liqueurs from Ireland, whether it's in Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland. So we'll have more on that on the show this weekend. Gordon, let's bring it over to you now. This may be an area you're not familiar with, but have you guys seen any impact from tariffs on Glengoyne and Tamdhu especially?
Yeah, we have. Undoubtedly. Because we've had to put through price increases, and that has caused, it's the way it is. We've seen a slight compression in certain markets, grown in other markets, but overall, we've noticed it. And I think the Scotch whisky industry has noticed it for sure. The bigger players certainly have noticed it as well. For me, it's what really annoys me about it is, considering what's going on in the world at the moment. It's smaller producers. It's always the smaller guys who seem to get crushed by this, and we're a slightly bigger, smaller guy, if you know what I mean. But it's the smaller guys. It's not even it's to do with big Boeing and Airbus, and you would just think people would go, look what's going on in the world. There's a pandemic on. Christ, we've got Brexit going on. Let's not even get into that. There's a lot of things going on, and you would just think, for once, people would think a bit outside the box, and the European Union would go, and the Americans would go, right, let's just cancel all this. This is ridiculous. And I know it's not as simple as that, and there's more to it than that, but really that should be the thinking behind this. And it's just, for me, bourbon shouldn't be tariffed. Single malt shouldn't be tariffed, and ultimately it's smaller producers and people who are employed in the businesses in America as well as in Europe that suffer from it, as well as the public who have to pay higher prices. So nobody wins, and it's just it's my personal opinion on it, and it's just ridiculous.
I agree 100%.
There you go, talking common sense again, Gordon. Hate it when you guys.
Doesn't happen very often. But no, I mean, really, look at what is going on in the world. There's a global pandemic. Trade is difficult. Things are difficult. Business is difficult for everybody. Nobody knows what's going on, and yet there's still tariffs on, things that. Let's face it, whiskey is a product that makes people relax, enjoy. They can enjoy it in things that, it's just bonkers.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, I mean, you just would think, really, come on, guys, bash the heads together and get it sorted.
Let's talk about Glengoyne for a second, Gordon. How are you guys doing at the visitor center there? Have you been able? I know that everything locked back down. Are you guys closed to visitors again? Or
we are now. Yeah, so we got locked down a little bit in Scotland. I mean, Britain, different parts and different things going on are all around the UK. Northern Ireland, you probably heard today, is quite heavily locked down at the moment. And really, in Scotland, we're in the central belt where Glengoyne is we are locked down. Not totally as bad as it was back in March or April, but we've got cases that have risen. Our distillery is now shut to visitors. We did open in about middle of July, and we had some great numbers comparatively, not as high as they normally would be in a July and August, but pretty good numbers coming through there. And we normally get up to sort of 90,000 visitors a year, but we're not going to be anywhere near that this year, unfortunately. So we are now shut down again just at the moment, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But it is getting into that quieter time of the year. December is November, December, January, February is not renowned for being busy times for distilleries.
Except on the sales side during the holidays, but
there is that, yeah, and that is an upside to what we have done in terms of our e-commerce, and we have managed to do quite a lot of interesting things to engage people with the distillery as well as the brands, doing more of this type of thing that, as you said, there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, and this is what we've had to do more of, and we've done pretty well pivoting on to doing this kind of thing.
I remember you guys did the jigsaw puzzle earlier this year that went out with some of the bottles of Glengoyne, right?
Yeah, I'm still trying to finish it. Yeah. Yeah, we did a jigsaw puzzle. We've done a rebrand on Glengoyne as well in the pandemic. It's a couple of years' work, and so the complete revamp of what the brand is not about, but just an evolution of what it reflects. And yeah, we've done a lot, and we've done Rosebank in the background. We've got Tandoori teetering along beautifully around the world as a sherry cask whiskey, and there's plenty going on. But it's been busy, but it's been very different for me, for somebody who travels as much as I would travel. We were just talking about when we were in Victoria, which was 3 years ago in January. So I mean, that seems like last year, and whiskey involved. You know, we still need to do. Ultimately, we'll need to still do a bit of travel for sure when things get back to normal. But and I was actually, funny enough, seeing pictures of there was a whiskey show in Shenzhen at the weekend. So Shenzhen in China had a whiskey show. We were there with Tandoori, and there were people there, and there was people drinking whiskey in a whiskey show. It was like, oh my God, look at that. Amazing.
And let's just hope it doesn't turn into a super spreader event.
Well, we'll see. But yeah, so I mean, you know,
I'm getting tired of having you around the house.
Sorry, say that again.
Is your family tired of having you around the house?
Well, luckily, I live on my own. So, but it's. I mean, I've spent so much time in my house. Yeah, I've been out and about and been at Glengoyne and things. But comparatively to what I normally would do, it's been. I caught myself doing a bit of DIY. It's that bad. So, you know. But it's been an interesting 6 months, and I think it's unfortunately going to run on for a wee bit more.
Tom, we have a question for you, or a comment from Dave Kuhn. If he was running a Northwest whiskey brand, he'd release a peated whiskey named or branded after the wildfires that would benefit firefighters and other relief funds. You don't have a peated whiskey, but you are doing something similar with that right now in Oregon, right? Tell us about it.
Yeah, I was going to say we can meet that idea halfway. I think part of sort of truly reimagined single malt is doing our own thing and not our version of something else. So peated whiskey isn't anywhere in the plans, but we did commit to contributing all of the proceeds of the whiskey we sell in Oregon starting last month when the fires were really bad. And so that's something that we'll be donating to the American Red Cross's effort to support people affected by the fires on the West Coast. And it's just, look, we're doing what we can, and we realize, you know, we're not a large business, but if everybody does as much as they can, it adds up to something that makes a difference. And disasters like this, you know, make the news when the flames are big, and then people forget. But people who lose homes and businesses, you know, struggle for months or years to come. So we're doing what we can.
On a lighter note, Tabitha, DIY, does that stand for drink it yourself, Gordon?
Well, I can tell you enough of that. That's not a problem. It's more the do it yourself. Yeah, I've done a bit of home improvements, which have maybe not actually improved it. So that might be a bit of an issue. But yeah, just going back to your point there about, you know, we're doing our little bit here as well in terms of every bottle that we sell online. A pound of that goes to supporting the Ben charity, which in the UK is supporting hospitality and supporting all those kind of people who do great work and supporting the on-trade, which is so important because it's had such a tough 6 months. And, you know, again, pretty much across the UK, it's really, most of it's shut down. London's pretty quiet, has been. Scotland is, you know, we had a better summer, but it's been really quiet over the last 3 or 4 months, 3 or 4 weeks. And really, that's our little thing that we can do in terms of generating some funds for that. But I mean, I would just like to see a bit more from bigger businesses doing more. You know, I'm talking more like the Amazons and these kind of guys actually doing more for these types of things that you see smaller businesses doing more for, and it's just something that really, I think, you think of Facebook and you think of all these kind of guys, you think you should be doing more. I just personal opinion.
I have a good question here from Chris Ratcliffe. Some travel retail releases are now being announced. Is this the wrong time to consider travel retail? Is it maybe just a bit tone deaf? Are these smaller expressions now better targeted at fans to reinforce their interest? I know a bunch of the distilleries in Scotland, Gordon, have started selling what normally would be travel retail releases through their websites to the public.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think travel retails is a difficult area at the moment, if we're honest. And I partook in normally they have a big festival in Cannes, which would be sort of a couple of weeks ago. I partook in a virtual event about a week ago for that. Travel retail is difficult. Flights are down hugely. The airlines are struggling. I heard Cathay Pacific is really shedding lots of jobs, and these airlines are really struggling, which means that the airports are really struggling in terms of passenger numbers. Travel retail is and will be and will continue to be an important market in the future, but at the moment it's definitely a little bit stagnant for sure. And there's a reason why those travel retail whiskies are turning up in shops and turning up in online stores for people to buy, because they're not, there's a lot of stock of them. So and to go from where it was to 80% of what it was or less of what it was, it's a big drop. And I think travel retail has got a bit of time to go till it starts to get even close to where it was, and I'm talking a couple of years, I would say.
Yeah, if I can weigh in, I mean,
sure.
It is difficult, but we're in a unique position because we directly operate a tasting room at Portland International Airport, and so we're in the travel retail business in a way that's a little different from the traditional sense. And what we found is, I mean, yes, financially, the fact that traffic is down 70% is bad, but the experience, whoever that 30% is, must really need to travel, because otherwise they wouldn't be there. And they are so grateful to find interesting products and to have interesting experiences in what otherwise is a pretty miserable experience. And so we've been very pleasantly surprised, at our airport tasting room that while, we're running at 30% of the number of people going through security, we're maybe down 50%, and, in 2020, down 50% is the new growing like crazy. So I do think there is demand for interesting things and interesting experiences during travel. It's just weird.
I would add to that, and absolutely would agree with that. I think if it sounds like you're making the best of a bad situation, as it were, in Portland. But I think travel retail's also suffered over the years for the products have been a bit bland in travel retail, and it's it was the sort of seeding of, if you look at 10 years ago or 8 years ago, it was a seeding of mass NAS whiskies and ones that some weren't actually that good. And I think the offerings that if you seek out, there's some good stuff to seek out in travel retail, but it's just. I think when you're traveling at the moment, the last thing you're thinking about, unless you're after Pacific whiskey, is to go and get a bottle of whiskey, because you just want to get through the airport on your plane and go. I think probably is more of the mentality at the moment.
Yeah, part of the fun of the whole travel retail experience was going to the tasting bar, but those are shut down now. Those aren't going to be open.
No. I mean, there's an amazing one in Singapore, which when I worked for my previous company, Beam Suntory, we did some really interesting things in there, pouring Japanese whiskies, and I mean, it was fantastic. But that whole experience that you add those layers to it is very hard to do now in engaging people, other than saying, would you like to buy a bottle of something with a mask on? So I think the experience is the trouble at the moment, as well as the lack of numbers. So.
And Dave Kuhn points out, Bricklady's Octomore 11.2 is available for online purchase, which is a first. The 0.2 Octomores have always been the travel retail exclusive. and
Yeah,
they're through their website.
It makes a lot of sense because people will want them. So, if you can do it for the short term, then yeah, that's fine. But I mean, we've not got any of our travel retail whiskies available on any of our Tandoori or Glengoynes. We did bring in a single cask that we had at one airport because a lot of people have been requesting it, but the standard ranges, no. So
how do you decide what goes to travel retail and what goes to the high street shops?
Well, the key point is travel retail is it used to be duty free. It's now travel retail. Obviously, with Brexit and things, that's going to change from the UK perspective. But travel retail is a different market, and so one of the major things is that you can't have really products that you would sell in a liter bottle, that you would sell in the domestic market. And so that's why a lot of brands have new products in travel retail. And we did that with Tandoori. We brought out a couple of products that we wanted to bring in because of the sherry. There was very little whiskey in travel retail. It was all sherry casks. We were delivering something a little bit different. We invested a little bit behind it, and it's gone very, very well. But one of the challenges is keeping the interest level and the variety of whiskies in travel retail wide, which I think helps the consumer. But of course, then you've got the bigger brands have got investment behind it to drive you towards their brands. So it's a difficult situation because of also the margins that sometimes are needed and things like that can make it. A lot of brands don't even do travel retail. There's a lot of the smaller brands don't do travel retail because they just think it's, they sell everything they do as it is, so they don't need to. And it's an important market for sure, but you have to sort of play the game a bit, if you know what I mean.
Good comment here from Aaron Krause. That store in Portland that you guys run, Tom, is great and fun. Spent way too much money there. Met Tom at our local pub in the South Bay a few years ago, then was lucky enough to visit Westward a bit afterwards. And Aaron says, thanks for the visit to Westward, Tom.
Anytime. We love having friends over.
You guys, and I think High West are the only ones I know of outside of Kentucky where they even run tasting, where distilleries have tasting rooms. And the ones in Kentucky, it's more of a bourbon trail type thing where you can taste a bunch of the different distilleries. But you guys are the only ones I know of, along with High West in Salt Lake, that have your own airport tasting room.
We just think it's very important to connect with people at a personal level, and so we don't contract out the operation of our tasting room to a food service operator. We do it ourselves. So when you visit Westward at Portland International Airport, you're talking to somebody who's one of us, who has worked shifts at the distillery making whiskey, who can really share the experience, not just of what Westward is, but who we are. And we love that. And I agree, High West does a wonderful job of that as well.
But I think, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong on this, you may not know the answer, but I believe High West does contract its operation out because it also serves food and stuff. So they have to go through the airport's concessionaire, and they basically just supply the whiskeys, and it's a branded deal for them.
Yeah, I don't know one way or another. I know I've had a wonderful time visiting them, but yeah, I don't know the details of their airport arrangement. I know for us, it is self-managed.
And Chris Ratcliffe asks, Tom, how you find people react to the idea of an American single malt? Or are they trying to compare your whiskeys to Scotch or to bourbon? And it's really not a comparison at all, is there?
Yeah, we want people who visit us or people who enjoy Westward to have an experience of Westward and to form an opinion of Westward. Without getting too geeky on the marketing side, I don't think people buy categories, especially when they're early in their development. People fall in love with brands, and they like what a certain producer does, and they want to learn more about it, and they want to try more things from them. And if enough people do things that are similar and do them well, then that grows up and becomes a category. But definitely, our mission of reimagining single malt wasn't around creating a category. It was around creating whiskey that really expresses the American Northwest.
We have a comment from Bill for you, Gordon. As much as he loves the sherry casks, if new Tamdhu could recreate that honey note distillate forward bottle too, he'd be very happy. Of course, Bill's a whiskey geek from way back, so you're going to have to work to please him.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, just to give you a little bit of background about the sherry is that, if you we did a film on this, which I would strongly recommend people have a look at, Spain to Speyside Tamdhu. If you type it into YouTube, you'll find it, or go onto the Tamdhu website. I think the first thing is when Leonard bought Tamdhu, it's a 4 million litre distillery. So it's a big distillery, and it was part of the Edrington Group. And it had sherry casks. The stocks that we bought were sherry casks. So we made a decision back in 2012, 2013, just to produce a sherry cask Speyside whiskey. And at that point, sherry casks were really, and still are predominantly, really only used for finishing, really only used maybe married with bourbon. Very few whiskies, are only sherry cask matured from start to finish. Very, very few. And when you look at the provenance of the sherry casks from Spain, the 6-year process they go through, it was a conscious decision to say, well, we're not going to be able to make as much single malt as we could if we married it with bourbon, but this is why we're doing it. It's a commitment to a style of whiskey, which I love, and that's very Ian Macleod. It's very Glengoyne. It's very Glengoyne sherry cask as well. It's a real commitment to say we want to produce this tasting style of whiskey. What's the benefit to the consumer? Well, it's different to this. It will give you a thicker mouth experience because you're using sherry casks. You'll get a longer finish, a heavier whiskey, a whole range of different things that you get every time you drink a Tamdhu. And that's why we do it. And that's why Tamdhu has really beginning to garner a real small but very focused group of people who are really seeing it for what it is, which is wonderful quality. And the single casks and the limited releases and the core ranges are really, really special. And I'm excited about where Tamdhu will go. But to answer Bill's question, I'm glad he loves sherry casks, put it that way, from a Tamdhu perspective.
We have a great comment or a question from Dave Kuhn. Hey, chat room, should I drink Ardbeg, Lagavulin, or Bricklady next?
Oh, gee whiz.
Yes, you should. All three.
Yeah, all three. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Any of those.
Yeah, I would. I'm a bit of a Lagavulin fan. Like what they do at Bricklady as well, and I enjoy Ardbeg. So, but Dave, to be honest, my Isla is a Bowmore. I've always been a Bowmore guy, so try that as well. But also,
you work for Bowmore, so
I did work for Bowmore, yes. But there's also another one you should try called Smokehead. That's a really good one.
Yeah, well, that's not really an Isla blended malt, but it's a smoky one. And they were just. I just heard about this push you guys are doing in the what's left of the on-premise in the UK.
Yeah,
during the Halloween period here with Smokehead, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's difficult at the moment, but Smokehead is a whiskey that, if you look at a bottle of Smokehead, it doesn't. The one thing you would say about it as a single malt is it's genuinely unique. There is no other bottle that looks like a bottle of Smokehead. It's got a skull on it, and it's a single malt from Isla. Not many whiskies do that, and so it's an attitudinal brand. We don't talk about which distillery it is. We don't talk about maturation. We just talk about, if you want to try smoky whiskey, drink it. Don't get hung up on any of the wonderful Isla stories and things, which a lot of the other brands do, and they do it so well because they have distilleries and provenance. And we just say, you want to drink a great Isla whiskey that's smoky and going to give you smoke in your head? Drink Smokehead and enjoy it. And it's really, really popular at the moment. It's going really, really well, Smokehead. So we're excited by that brand as well.
And let's go back to your past history here, because Dave Kuhn wants to know, what's the go-to Bowmore in the standard lineup? Because he's just never gotten into Bowmore, never having been there. But he was curious, what's your go-to Bowmore?
15-year-old. The 15-year-old darkest. It's a sherry cask finish, 12 years in bourbon, then 3 years finished in sherry cask. Beautiful whiskey.
And Tabitha says the first rule of Smokehead is don't talk about Smokehead.
It is the Fight Club of whiskey. Yeah, absolutely. Don't exactly.
And that's one of those ones you don't want to. And I'm going to post this question from Graham Fraser. We asked this and answered it early on, Graham. But Gordon, just give us, for those who have joined us late, since it is a live show, what's the update on Rosebank construction?
So very quickly, we had to pause it through COVID, and at the moment, things are just, we're in a real up and down situation at the moment, and having no consistency in terms of what you're doing on site makes it really difficult in terms of people and all that sort of behind the scenes stuff that people don't see. So, we are hoping to sort of go full steam ahead very shortly again, and we will be looking to open a distillery in 2022. With production being ironed out, hopefully by sort of the end of the summer 2022. These are rough and probably will change. And then we'll be producing with a single malt release in, wait for it, 2030.
You'll be releasing more of these older whiskeys.
And there will be more older whiskeys between now and then, basically, between now and the new single malt. So it's a challenge at the moment, but it's a challenge we're up for, and we're very excited about it. And we are full steam ahead. It's just on pause at the moment.
And we have a question from David Owen for you. Could you ask Gordon what distillery lies behind As We Get It Isla whiskey? I suppose he knows. I know that's one of the Ian Macleod brands, right?
Yeah, but again, it could be. It changes. It's not just one. It will change depending on the casks or the way that we made the whiskey. So there's not. So take it as it is. It's each one is different. It is what it is. One may be this one may be the next one. There is no set distillery.
And just a quick comment from Watchman 999. Did I hear correctly? There's a new distillery coming to Stirling, Wolf Run. It's Wolfcraig. We mentioned this on the podcast this week. They have applied to Stirling Council for planning permission with hopes of getting construction underway sometime next spring if they can get that expedited, and then perhaps opening in 2022. There's a whole bunch of folks behind that one, a whole bunch, including Ian McMillan, who was at Distell for many years, or the Burn Stewart distilleries, and also at Bladnock is one of the consultants on that, and Michael, who was at White and Mackay.
Yeah, there's some big names behind it. So I wish them all the best success. Fantastic, really exciting.
And Ben Marnock says, I was born 300 yards from Rosebank. I didn't know there was a hospital that close.
Yeah, no, there is. It's very urban distillery. People forget that. It's not. It's on the edge of a canal, on the edge of a town. And actually, it's quite interesting in terms of it was mothballed in 1993, and it was, legend has it was between Rosebank and Glenkinchie about which one was going to be kept in the sort of what is now Diageo, and obviously Rosebank lost out, unfortunately.
Tom, I want to ask you real quickly here. Let's talk about what you guys have coming in the future now. Now that you've got the new releases coming and the new bottling package, and we'll show it off again here. This is the Pinot Noir cask that will be available throughout the U.S. When will you be exporting, and when will we see more expressions coming from you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely priority one is expanding our three core expressions, our American single malt, our stout cask finish, and the Pinot Noir finish that you just showed. And I will say it for an independent producer, it requires an act of God to build real distribution. So that's a big effort in its own right, but one that will be happening in the next, let's say, the next 12 months. In terms of exports, we've had a very successful business in Australia for some time now. Australia has accounted for, depending on the year, let's say on average, about 20 to 25% of our business. And next year will be a big one there as well. So it's a fantastic market for us, and one in which we learn and one in which we benefit in terms of our sales. In Europe, we launched just before COVID because we're planning geniuses, and so that's been interesting. But that has definitely been slower going in some markets. Although in markets where our partner has a very well-developed e-commerce infrastructure, like France, we've done really well. And so France has become our biggest market in Europe in year one, but it's still very much early days. And so I think it'll really be the end of next year when those three expressions that make up our family will be available, broadly in the U.S. and both in stores and on premise and also through e-commerce, and then in Europe and obviously Australia and beyond.
And what you were saying there is absolutely, it applies to us to a certain extent as well. And in terms of, doing what I do, I'm focused on how do we get, in a normal world, how do we get liquid on lips? How do we get people tasting this whiskey? And, you're doing it in Portland Airport in terms of, you've got people at the distillery who are adding that layer of this is how it's made, this is what we do, this is the idiosyncrasies of how we make it that makes it so unique. And that's the challenge in markets like France, is that you can't go there at the moment. You can't ingratiate and sort of influence people as much as you would normally, because we just can't do it. And that's what's so frustrating about the current climate, is that whiskey it's something that you touch and feel and enjoy and remember, and you want to hear about it. And we can't do it in the way that we want to do it at the moment.
For sure, but I'll say look, it's been a tough year, but I've been really pleasantly surprised by people's willingness to also reimagine the way they learn about things. And, somewhat to the detriment of Miles, my colleague, who's been doing a number of tastings for Australia. And so he'll be at the distillery at 2 a.m., leading online tours and tastings for people at reasonable hours where they live, and that really has made a difference. So, like you, I look forward to being in places I love and being with people I enjoy seeing and sharing what we do in person. But I also think we've learned that there are a lot of things we weren't doing that really do work, and I want to make sure we keep doing those as well.
I do agree with that. There's certain things that we've done during this pandemic that we'll still be doing in 5 years' time, because we've been, and it will be a part of the mix of how we do stuff. And I think that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I want to ask you about your beginnings in the industry, because you were born originally in Guatemala, and not known as a whiskey hotbed, more of a rum place. But how did you get into the whiskey business to begin with?
Hey, I did what I could to keep the Johnny Walker brand up and running down there. Guatemala is, of course, a rum market, but it is actually a single malt market as well. And I was only half kidding about Johnny Walker. I think it's such a strong brand there. And so the whiskey that I came of age with, that I was exposed to, was single malt. And so that was my first experience with whiskey, and some of or rather malt whiskey, and then some of the single malt brands started coming in. How that translates to years later, me being a partner in a malt whiskey producer in the U.S. is a long story, but it really does begin with loving malt whiskey and then being in the beverage industry. Eventually meeting Christian Krogstad, my partner, who had started the original version of our company a few years before, and getting to build it with him, over the last decade plus. It's been a ton of fun.
And then you actually produce a Guatemalan rum at House Spirits too, right?
We do. So our largest outside investor is the Leal family in Guatemala, who are very good personal friends and are sugar growers and millers. And so we thought it'd be a lot of fun to collaborate on a rum, which is from sort of estate grown cane of theirs that they mill. We distill it in Guatemala and then bring it up to the U.S. and age it right next to our Westward barrels. So yeah, that brand is called Casa Magdalena, or as we say here, Magdalena. But it is pretty yummy.
Not to be confused with St. Magdalene in Scotland. It's not confused.
I don't think the two could ever be confused.
It's a good rum. If you get a chance to get some,
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. I mean, it's not like I do tasting notes for a lot of rums, but it's a good one.
Yeah, and we found some interesting, let's say, cultural exchanges between rum and Westward, which of course is our core business. We've always had a little bit of rum cask finished Westward in our tasting rooms, and we're about to work on a bigger release for next year that will include some of that rum cask finish. So rum barrels can be really good friends with single malt whiskey.
As you guys know, Gordon, right? You've done some rum stuff, right?
Yeah, we have. We've actually just released a new rum, funnily enough, which is really celebrating the Lang's business, which actually Lang's brothers used to own Glengoyne many, many years ago, and they sold it laterally to the Edrington Group. But Lang's was a huge importer of not just whiskey and blenders, but they imported a lot of rum. And so we've just released a banana rum, which is really in the supermarkets in the UK and available, and has been really, really well received. We launched it by putting a rum shack on a beach on the west coast of Scotland in early October, which actually you'd think could go completely and utterly wrong, which might have actually worked anyway, but it was actually a beautiful day. It was about 19 degrees, and I mean, that's cold for you guys, but it worked really, really well. So no,
It was like 66 degrees over in the US in Fahrenheit, so it's not that bad.
it's not that bad. It's doable to drink rum on a beach in Scotland.
It's workable.
So we do a bit of rum as well, yeah, for sure.
And Tom, you guys, are you still making Aviation Gin at your place?
We do still produce it.
You don't own it anymore. That some actor guy bought it, and then
we create. Sorry, Mark, I interrupted you. What was the question?
No, just you still have to work with him on that. I know he sold a big share of that brand or whatever, but explain how the whole Aviation Gin thing came about.
Yeah, my pleasure. So the original idea for Aviation belongs to Christian, my partner, who I mentioned earlier, and Ryan McGarrian, who was a bartender, now a restaurant owner in Portland. And so they arrived at what became the recipe for Aviation Gin and launched it, some time ago. And so then we grew the brand and put it in the packaging it's in now, and got it, let's say, on its way. And then we sold the brand 3.5 years ago, and continued to produce it for the new brand owners, Davos Brands. And it was actually Davos who then brought Ryan Reynolds into the equation. So that was not us. And as much as I love Deadpool and would happily hang out with Ryan Reynolds, we don't get to hang out. But it's been really fun to see the brand grow up, and then of course recently be acquired by Diageo. So it's really fun to see something that you saw from the beginning become what it is now.
Well, I've heard this on social media, but if Reynolds ever decides to get into whiskey, God help us all, because he's in marketing, and if he gets his hands on a whiskey brand, y'all are screwed, because he can take that thing and just run with it.
He is a remarkable marketer, for sure.
Oh no, he's good. He's good, and he's the kind of guy. What I like about him is seems pretty down to earth, and he's the kind of guy that you think could go for a beer with him. He seems pretty cool.
Chris Ratcliffe wants to know if you can get Westward over to the UK anytime soon.
Whiskey Exchange or Masters of Malt today, now.
It's on there.
And then that's our core American single malt expression. Stout cask and Pinot will come next year, but there's no need to wait for that first one.
Great. So, Chris, you can get online as soon as the webcast is over and place your orders for that. Gordon, what can we expect to see from you guys in 2021? that you can talk about?
We've done quite a lot this year. So 2021 seems a long time away, but there will always be something. And I'm just trying to think off the cuff. I just got this here. We obviously did the Glengoyne rebrand, which was a major thing for us to really change it and make it into this is the new Legacy Chapter 2 that will be in the States coming up in the probably beginning of next year. But so that was a huge job for us. And Tamdhu will develop. I mean, the biggest thing for Tamdhu, and we work backwards from that, is in about a year and a half, we're going to have an 18-year-old for Tamdhu. So we're waiting to have the stocks for that 18-year-old. So we're now working out how we have that as a sort of hard stop in, a year and a half. So we work out what comes in the next bit stock wise. So Tamdhu is going to continue on its evolution of sherry cask. Glengoyne is going to bed down in its current sort of look and feel, and we're going to pick up. We're doing a lot of work in the US as well, despite the fact we've got tariffs. We're going to be in the US a lot more, as much as we can. We've got more resource over there as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but there's nothing specific that I can say this is definitely happening next year, just because of what's going on. Things are.
Watchman 999 wants to know how about making teapot dram available for half price around the world?
Well, the teapot dram has been hugely successful, and the teapot dram, there will be a new teapot dram next year. And it's always first fill Oloroso sherry, European oak, boom. And this one was, batch 7 was a bit older, made an older profile, so it changed the price a little bit, but it will always be hugely popular, always generally available from the distillery. But because of what's going on, we may look at that and just, see how we do it next year, because people aren't going to be coming to the distillery, or certainly haven't been this year. So, it normally sells out pretty quickly. So, that's something that we may look at about how we do it next year.
And explain the story behind the teapot dram.
Well, it's a great story. It's one of those wonderful whiskies that is story-led, but it's a genuine distillery story. And back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, back in that sort of early 60s, 70s, dramming was a major part of being a worker at a distillery. So when you started shift, you'd get a nice measure of generally new make in a lot of distilleries. It would be new make spirit, boof, and you would drink that before you start work. And then at your lunch break, you'd get another one. And then obviously at the end of the day, you'd get a third one. At Glengoyne, it was always whiskey. So it was always sort of young whiskey, which is why the teapot's always been young. And really the story was that the younger guys, so Duncan McNichol, who was working at the distillery, who retired in January this year, was a younger guy back then. He'd been at this, he was saying, he used to get these measures of whiskey, and you're like, I'm not sure I want to drink that before I start working on the stills or mashing or whatever. And so basically what happened at Glengoyne was that in the canteen there was a copper teapot. And the younger guys were well, if you're not going to drink it, you should pop it in the copper teapot in the canteen, so that the older guys before a night shift on a Friday or whatever could go, anybody fancy a cup of tea? And all that whiskey that had been poured in there over the week would be lashed out around everybody to have a dram or a few large drams. And so that's where the teapot dram comes from. And it's that story of Glengoyne's dramming sort of experience for the people that work there. Thankfully, with modern day health and safety, dramming doesn't happen anymore. And it stopped in the 1970s, which is probably a good thing.
Probably, yeah. Comments in the last few minutes about folks wanting to see Glengoyne go to 46% non-chill filtered. What expressions do you have that are 46 non-chill filtered?
So our core range 10, 12, 18, 21 are all 43. We have the new Legacy, which I have here, which is 48. And there is the Cask-Strength as well, which is up at 59. So there are two expressions here. And the Legacy Series Chapter 2 is actually, here it is here. You can see this here. Beautiful color. Beautiful. It's one of the most bourbon-forward Glengoynes we've ever produced. So it's got about 40-odd% of first fill bourbon in it, which is mostly Glengoyne has first fill sherry with a hint of bourbon, but this is a lot more bourbon, so you get a lot more of that really fruity Glengoyne style coming through. So this is a brilliant whiskey at 48, non-chill filtered. And then there's a Cask-Strength, and these sit in that sort of $80 price point, something like that. So great whiskies, but yeah, no age statement. But I mean, look at the color of that. You can tell that's not a young whiskey. So beautiful whiskey. And so we do have expressions that are higher, and the 25 as well as at 48%. So yeah, we do get people who ask us about Glengoyne being at 46. There's reasons why it isn't. Yeah, we do produce expressions that are at higher strength.
And for both of you, Graham Fraser asks, if prices for quality drams keep increasing, why not bring out 50 CL or half bottles? In the US, it would have to be 375 ml bottles. 50 CLs are not legal in the US. To make it more affordable, does it make sense to give people a smaller bottle that would be at a lower price point, especially given the pandemic and the economy? Does it make sense, or is it just too cost prohibitive to do that?
Ultimately, very quickly, I don't think it is actually, you get less whiskey for your money. Generally, because the cost of bottling it, the cost of the bottle, there's not a huge change. You'll actually comparatively get less for your money. You would never, if you say you're, let's work on a 70 and a 50. If your 70 CL is £70, your 50 CL will not be £50. It will be 55 or £59, and that's just the way it works, because of the costs of doing it. So on you go. That's what I would say. So from a consumer perspective, you get less whiskey for your buck.
Tom?
We have the same experience. It becomes an inferior value as you try to push it into smaller packs. I do think there's a marketing reason to try smaller packs, which we don't do right now. But beyond that, I think we're much more focused on the best possible value at a standard size bottle.
Does it make sense for sampling purposes, though?
Yes, but again, at least for us, we, of course, the product needs to speak for itself. But there's so much of where our whiskey comes from and who it comes from that we wouldn't imagine replacing that. I would still rather be there pouring that sample for you, talking about it, or have one of my colleagues do it. And I realize that doesn't scale as well as having minis, but there's just too much to tell at this stage of the brand's life. We'd rather grow a little more slowly, but really get to tell the story ourselves.
Tom Gordon showed us the Glengoyne repack and redesign, and we've shown this a couple of times here, but when you look at these two side by side, the old and the new Pinot Noir cask, the original was sort of just a very generic bottle in many ways. It's what you'd expect a whiskey bottle to look like, but this new one looks more bespoke, more custom. I don't know if you can see, I'm going to try to show the angles off here in the light, but you see there's more facets and it's a more squared off design with more angular design.
It's nice.
What goes into that design when you're picking that? Because obviously this is custom glass, and you've got the embossed part here with True Northwest on here. But when you're doing this, I'm assuming this is pretty much a standard catalog bottle from a glass maker that pretty much anybody can get their hands on if they're making a whiskey. But this you had to go some to get your hands on. I'm assuming that raised the cost a bit, but it also makes the bottle stand out on the shelf, right?
Absolutely. We wanted, I was mentioning at the beginning, something that visually communicated our intention to reimagine single malt in the American Northwest. And so the inspiration for that bottle, and obviously it's a little abstract, but is a crow's nest at the top of a house in the Columbia River Gorge with a view of the Columbia River and the gorge and the mountains that cut into it and the colors. And And so we wanted something that really was evocative of that in the shapes and the fact that the top is not symmetrical. It really is that rugged picture of the American Northwest and of the gorge in particular.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think it's a lovely bottle. And I think, we're a company that also understands how important that is, because when you look at the Tandoori bottle,
Mm-hmm.
that is a pretty unique bottle in terms of its sort of style as well. Much more inspired by the sort of Victorian era of the distillery, but it's a...
I didn't have a Tandoori bottle here to show off, Gordon.
But I mean, I'll make sure you get one. You can, that's why this is so important to us, because, it's such a unique bottle shape for whiskey, Scotch whiskey. There's no other whiskey that's in a bottle anywhere like that. And we put it in a beautiful box now that you see the bottle through the box. And so all these things are hugely important in markets, for stand out on shelf, as you say, to look a little bit different to the whiskey next door. And that's, because not all whiskey is, it's not all driven by taste. Unfortunately, people look at things and buy stuff, and they're in, so the pack is really important, particularly in some markets more than others. This bottle is, 95% of people love it, 5% of people don't like it. So, that's the way it is. But it's when you're building a brand like Tandoori, putting in quality sherry cask whiskey, the whole presentation has to be great.
5% of the people aren't going to like anything, no matter what you do. They're going to complain about something.
There is that. It's probably the same.
5% is pretty optimistic.
Yeah, it's probably
I said 5% is optimistic.
Yeah.
Tom, I want to give
not
you
for your bottle, but just in general.
Yeah,
Tom, I want to give you a chance to talk about Portland as a whiskey destination, because it's not just you guys. There's a whole whiskey community, good bars, microbreweries. If somebody wants to go visit when we can start traveling again, why should they go visit Portland for a whiskey destination?
It really is one of the world's great culinary scenes, and also brewing cultures, and winemaking cultures. So I would say one great reason to do it is that within a relatively narrow radius, you can go to some of the best wineries in the world. You can visit some of the best breweries in the world, and yes, you can visit the home of some of the best American whiskey, and in particular single malt. So it's nice to have all of that together, and I think people who visit are then pleasantly surprised by how much we all work with each other, and in a sense how much of the culture of what each of us does is in the products the other ones make. So it's a really beautiful ecosystem.
And Gordon, why should people look to Glengoyne when they're visiting Glasgow, when they're traveling into Scotland? I know Glengoyne is pretty much as close as you can get to a distillery in Glasgow proper, right?
Yeah, there's the Clydeside. There's the Clydeside Distillery right in the centre of Glasgow, which is a great experience.
Back in the old days, in the old days, you could as close as you could get.
Auchentoshan and Glengoyne are about as close as you can get. Yeah, no, I think Glengoyne is, firstly, there's a bus route that drops you right at the door, which is great if you go to a whiskey distillery. Secondly, it's not very far away, so it's about a 25-minute drive. And the thing that and you summed it up with what you were saying about your shop in Portland, or your sort of tasting bar in Portland Airport. Everybody, when you go to Glengoyne, everybody has been there for years. They know every idiosyncrasy. They pass that on in every tour. And although it's a very small distillery, produces 1 million litres a year and is a very small site, and we get 90,000 visitors a year, we are bringing that down a little bit. Obviously this year, but generally bringing it down. The reviews are, everybody says, so knowledgeable, so welcoming, such a wonderful experience. I really have never been to a distillery like this, and that's what we focus on, is great people, great communicators, great and people who are passionate, and people who love the brand for what it is. And that's part of being a family-run business as well, and that's really crucial to us. So that's why I would strongly recommend that anybody is in Glasgow should come to Glengoyne when it's open, and let's hope it's open soon for the whole time.
Well, now I want to go. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say we actually are open, and we're pretty hardcore about keeping the visiting experience safe. So we're open to very small numbers, but small businesses need visitors. So if you can visit safely, please visit.
Are you guys selling branded masks though?
We do. We
Brilliant.
do. We wear them and we sell them.
Brilliant. And knowing
It's not our main business, though.
Knowing Miles Monroe, your master distiller with the ZZ Top beard, I'm assuming the masks are all beard friendly, right?
I don't know that we really designed them for that, but definitely our distilling team have been rock stars about working safely. We've been working, other than when the fire shut us down for a few days, nonstop since COVID began. No infections, nobody getting sick. We're finding ways to do our work and to do it responsibly.
Yeah, and that's the challenge here. At the moment, hospitality is taking a real kicking in the UK, and actually, if you look at the cases and linked to hospitality, it's out of sync by how much it's getting punished at the moment, and it's an easy target. And on the back of that, distilleries where we've had very strong COVID practices in terms of social distancing and in terms of changing the tour and the working practices to protect the workforce. We work in a way that the workforce are kept away from visitors, and they're in bubbles and they're working shifts. All of that investment has, gone hugely, and the really talented people at Glengoyne and other distilleries to get COVID procedures in place. And then, because you serve alcohol, poof, and it's the easy target. And it's not as if there's millions of visitors, fine, but there's still people that want to come, and we want to give them the best experience we can, and we just can't do that. So we're looking at virtual stuff that we've been doing and other things that we can do, but it's still not the same as visiting the distillery.
Well, guys, this has been fun. We've managed to waste an hour and 20 minutes of everybody's time tonight. We have some good drams and have a lot of great conversation along the way. I want to thank you both for joining us. Tom Mooney from Westward Distillery, House Spirits in Portland. Gordon Dundas from Ian Macleod Distillers, Rosebank. The new Rosebank 30 just announced today. If you can find it, get it. I've got a sample on the way. Hopefully it gets through. I get to try it, and we'll have tasting notes for it soon at whiskycast.com. Guys, thank you for doing this, especially Gordon. I know that it's late night for you there. It's after 11 o'clock your time, so you get to speak in tomorrow.
I've got a whiskey in my hand. I'm talking to fellow great people about whiskey, and it's great. I'm really happy.
Great. Thank you. And Tom, thank you as always. Give everybody, Christian, Miles, the entire team, our best. And hopefully we'll all be able to get together and have a dram again soon. That House Spirit room, if you're flying through Portland Airport, please check it out. I have been in there myself, and it is well worth the stop.
It's my first international destination now, is Portland. I'm just coming there.
Yeah, all right. You and I are going to do a cultural exchange.
Yeah, okay. And I'll land and we'll go to the bar. You can fly out as long as we have a drink in the bar together first.
Deal.
Hey guys. Okay. Thank you both for doing this. And folks, once again, as I mentioned earlier, don't forget that we are going to change things around a little bit. And we will be doing the next WhiskyCast Live a week from Friday on October 30th, the night before Halloween. Wright Thompson, who just wrote the new book Pappy Land, is coming out next month about the Van Winkle family. Wright Thompson from ESPN will be joining us. You can read my review for it right now at the WhiskyCast website, and we will have a lot more content on Friday nights from now on. At this point, this is the last of the Whiskey Wednesday webcasts. As I said earlier, we are going to combine things down and do one show a week. The idea was to do one solid show rather than scrambling around trying to find guests to fill into two shows. There's a lot of competition out there among the whiskey webcasts of the world, run by the distilleries and run by just about everybody for guests, and can't get everybody all the time that we'd like to have. So what we've decided to do is I'd rather do one good webcast a week than do two average ones. An average for us is pretty good, but you get my point. I'd rather do one really solid one. So we're going to cut it back to once a week. We started these things back in March during the pandemic as a way to provide extra content. And I don't think we ever really intended to do two webcasts a week for the entire rest of time. So we are going to phase it back and just do one. So with that, we will see you a week from Friday night, October 30th at 5 p.m. New York time, 2 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. London time. And just as Dave Kuhn points out, you'd rather bat 400 than 300. If you're not a baseball fan, yeah, batting 400 is much better than batting 300. So we'll see you next Friday night, a week from Friday night, October 30th, Halloween Eve. No, I will not be in costume. Good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves and stay safe. And when you're out in public, wear a mask, for crying out loud. Sláinte Shabbat. Good night, all.
Thanks, Mark.
There we go. Okay, we're still waiting for it to end. I am laughing here because when I click the end button, there's still this little thing that says, end of the broadcast. Well, yes, I clicked it and it's having trouble connecting. So please check your internet connection. This is one of the things where you want to fade to black and the computer is telling you, no, you can't fade just yet. So we're still here.
We're not like that. We don't just go away, man.
Yeah. I am laughing here. And until we can actually end this thing, because we can't, until it tells us, until StreamYard tells us we can actually end the broadcast. Ricker, no, we are not doing costumes. Dave Kuhn, we appreciate your comment. It says, Chris Ratcliffe, I see a slot for you on Wednesdays. That's not a bad idea. We'll talk about that. Spirit Bomb Encore. Dave Kuhn, no, we are not going to slam Southern Comfort. What we are